In the first week of August 1944, German 7th Army Headquarters was sending orders to divisions that had already been overrun. The orders arrived after Patton's forces had moved through. The officers on the other end of the line were either dead, captured, or moving to avoid encirclement. The command post did not know which. The maps told the story before the reports did. The Allied advance was not pushing forward, it was moving around, behind, into the rear. The question being asked in German headquarters was not whether the position could be held, it was whether the units in those positions still existed. The reports being written in those days share a specific quality. Each one describes a situation that had already changed by the time it was read. American Third Army had activated on August 1, 1944. In the 12 days that followed, it covered more ground than the entire Allied advance had covered in the previous 7 weeks. German units that had been preparing to defend against a frontal assault found themselves responding to threats from directions their maps had marked as secure rear areas. The shape of what was happening became visible in the maps before it was visible on the ground. A single American force was moving faster than the German response could follow. The German generals understood what they were seeing. The question was whether understanding it meant anything when the force causing it was already past them. The German intelligence assessments from this period name the cause specifically. The same name appears across multiple reports from different headquarters in the same week. The name in the German reports was Patton, General George S. Patton, Third Army. The Germans had spent months preparing for him. They had prepared in the wrong place. He had been held back by design since before D-Day. A deception kept German reserves at Pas-de-Calais. When he was finally released, they were still watching the wrong coast. The German High Command had kept its strongest reserves positioned against a Patton landing at Calais. Those reserves were still there when Patton crossed into France in the opposite direction. The men and equipment that might have stopped what followed were positioned 90 miles from where it was happening. They stayed there for weeks after Normandy, waiting for Patton to appear from the sea. Operation Cobra opened the gap on July 25. Third Army activated on August 1. Patton moved immediately. The speed of what followed was the thing the German reports could not account for. Third Army crossed the Sélune River. It took avalanches. It swung east and south simultaneously. German headquarters received reports describing positions being lost faster than replacement orders could be issued. In 14 days, Third Army liberated more French territory than any other Allied force. The German units in its path had 3 options: surrender, scatter, or be encircled. The German command structure was not failing because of bad decisions. It was failing because the decisions being made were based on information that was already outdated when it arrived. B.H. Liddell Hart interviewed the surviving German generals after the war. He asked them specifically about Patton's advance. Their answers were consistent enough that he published them together. What the German generals said privately about Patton is in 2 places. Their wartime reports and the post-war interviews they gave Liddell Hart both say the same thing. The German generals knew Patton before August 1944. They had faced him in North Africa and Sicily. Their assessments described a commander who moved faster than American doctrine suggested was possible. Wehrmacht intelligence reports from North Africa single out Patton by name. The assessment was specific. This general thinks differently about time and distance. Sicily took 38 days. The German forces retreating across the island were moving faster than their commanders expected because Patton was moving faster than their planning assumed was possible. The German commanders who faced him in Sicily made notes. Those notes went into the intelligence files. The assessment that emerged was that Patton operated by different timing assumptions than other Allied commanders. After Sicily, Patton was assigned to FUSAG, the Phantom Army Group in southeastern England. His role was to be seen, to be believed, to keep German reserves at Pas-de-Calais. German intelligence confirmed FUSAG was real. They confirmed Patton commanded it. They planned their defense around him attacking at Calais. The deception worked because they already feared him most. When Normandy came on June 6, German High Command believed it was a feint. The main attack, Patton at Calais, was still coming. That belief held their reserves in place for weeks. The German 15th Army at Pas-de-Calais stayed in position until late July, waiting for Patton. The forces that might have destroyed the Normandy beachhead were held there by a general who was not coming. Through June and July, the Allied advance in Normandy was slow. Bocage country, dense hedgerows, narrow lanes was turning the campaign attritional. German commanders had stabilized the line. Operation Cobra was planned to break the stalemate. A concentrated bombing strike west of St. Lo would open a gap. What moved through the gap would determine whether the breakout became a campaign-ending advance. The bombing opened the gap on July 25. German units west of St. Lo were shattered. The question was how fast something could move through before the gap closed. Eisenhower had been holding Patton. The deception required it. On August 1, with the gap open and the German reserves still at Calais, he activated Third Army. Patton crossed into France. Third Army moved immediately. No preparation phase, no consolidation. The doctrine Patton had spent his career developing, find the gap, drive through it, do not stop, was now being executed at Army scale. In the first 72 hours, Third Army covered distances German command assumed would take 2 weeks. Reports arriving at Wehrmacht headquarters described positions lost in a sequence that made no sense. The German communications intercepts and battlefield reports from this period document a specific phenomenon. The reports describing Third Army's position were outdated before they could be acted on. Towns that German command had marked as rear area assembly points were being liberated before the units ordered to defend them could arrive. The rear no longer existed in the way the maps showed it. By August 10, the shape of the trap was visible to anyone reading the maps correctly. Patton's forces were moving north. Canadian forces were pushing south from Caen. The German 7th Army was between. Von Kluge commanded Army Group B. He understood what the maps showed. The question was whether Hitler would allow a withdrawal before the pocket closed. The German reports from Falaise have a consistent quality. Each describes a situation that has already changed. The report is accurate when written. By the time it arrives, the position is gone. Liddell Hart's interviews with German generals captured this precisely. He asked them what had made Patton's advance different from other Allied operations they had faced. The answer was consistent across multiple interviews. The German generals told Liddell Hart that Patton's speed was not simply faster movement. It was movement time to arrive before the response could be organized. They described it as operating inside their decision cycle. They had faced Allied advances before. They knew how to respond to pressure on a line. What they had not faced was an advance that moved through the response before the response could be assembled. One German general told Liddell Hart that Third Army's position seemed wrong at first. Too far inside territory, his map still marked as German rear. He assumed the report was an error. The report was not wrong. By the time it was confirmed, Third Army had moved further still. The confirmation of the previous position arrived simultaneously with reports of positions beyond it being lost. The Falaise pocket closed August 21, 50,000 German troops captured, 10,000 killed. The German 7th Army ceased to exist as a fighting force in 8 days. The German generals who survived the pocket described the same experience independently. Orders arriving from headquarters describing a situation that no longer matched what they could see from their own command posts. Some reports from inside the pocket were never completed. They describe a position as of a specific hour. The officer writing them did not finish. The situation changed before the next sentence could be written. The German plan had assumed that even a rapid Allied advance would follow recognizable patterns: pressure on the line, consolidation, resupply, then advance again. Patton did not follow those patterns. On August 15, von Kluge told Hitler the Western Front had collapsed and the war could not be won. He had commanded Army Group B for less than 2 weeks. Hitler replaced von Kluge with Model the same day. Von Kluge left for Germany. He died by suicide on August 19, knowing Hitler suspected him of involvement in the July 20 assassination attempt. Von Kluge left a letter to Hitler. It described the military situation. It asked Hitler to end the war before more men died in a situation that could not be reversed. The letter was the private record of a German field marshal's final assessment. It named the situation. It did not name Patton, but the situation it described had one specific cause. While von Kluge was being replaced and Falaise was closing, Third Army had already moved beyond it. The front was not retreating. The force it retreated from was already ahead of it. The German general who gave Liddell Hart the most precise account was Blumentritt, von Rundstedt's chief of staff. His assessment was specific about what had made response impossible. Blumentritt told Liddell Hart that Third Army operated at a tempo the German system could not answer. It assumed minimum time between action and response. Third Army did not allow that time. By the time a Third Army position was confirmed at division level, reported to Corps, relayed to Army, assessed at Army Group, and an order issued back, Third Army was no longer there. This is what the German reports recorded, not the loss of positions, the loss of the time required to respond to the loss of positions. The reports arrived too late because they were already history. Paris was liberated on August 25. Third Army had reached the Seine. The German force that had held France for 4 years had been broken in 25 days of operational movement. The German generals interviewed by Liddell Hart were consistent on one point. The Western Front was not lost at Normandy. It was lost in the 3 weeks after Third Army activated. Some men Liddell Hart interviewed were still in captivity. Their assessments were not filtered by the need to explain failure to superiors. They could say what they actually thought. What they thought consistently was that speed had been decisive, not numbers, not equipment, though they respected American equipment, the tempo, the willingness to move before the situation was fully controlled. Von Rundstedt told Liddell Hart that Third Army's speed was the single factor that most disrupted the coherent defense of France. He had faced every major Allied commander. He named Patton specifically. The assessments in the other side of the hill were not written by Allied historians. They were German generals explaining why they lost. The difference matters. This was the enemy's private verdict. The German general's verdict on Patton was not that he was brave or inspiring. It was that he had understood something about speed and command response that they had not adequately accounted for. The reports are still in the archives. Nara holds the captured German military records. The Bundesarchiv holds what survived the war on the German side. The documents that arrived too late are documented and readable. Patton never read most of the German reports about him. He did not need to. He knew what the advance had done because he had designed it to do exactly that. Third Army covered more ground in August 1944 than any other Allied force in the war. The German reports documented what it felt like to face an advance that moved faster than the response. The reports and the interviews say the same thing from two distances. In the moment, position lost, order too late. After the war, the tempo was decisive, speed made response impossible. The German force that might have stabilized the Western Front was destroyed at Falaise. What followed, the advance into Germany, the Rhine crossing, the end of the war, followed from those 25 days. Von Kluge's letter survived. He was dead the following morning. His assessment that the front could not be held was written from a staff car on a French road on August 18. The reports that arrived too late are preserved in archives on 2 continents. They document, in German military language, what it felt like to be on the receiving end of Third Army's advance. The command post that had been issuing orders to units that no longer existed was itself abandoned in August 1944. The men who had staffed it were captured, killed, or retreating toward Germany. The Other Side of the Hill was published in 1948. The German general's private assessment of what defeated them has been in print for 75 years. It is rarely quoted in popular D-Day accounts. The reports say what the generals confirmed in interview. Position lost. Order arrived too late. The force causing it was already past the position the order was responding to. The German generals wrote it down. The reports survived. The Liddell Hart interviews survived. What Patton's advance did to the German command structure is documented in the enemy's own words.